let's get started, Michelle. So, I also want to say thank you for taking your time to join us today to chat just a little bit about the ins and outs of starting and running your own private practice. And we're going to be talking to our wonderful Michelle Gibson. And before we do continue, I want to say that if you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave them in the chat and we will be answering them in the later half of this Q&A when we kind of open the floor to your questions or any other discussions. So, okay, Michelle. So, let me introduce myself. I'm Michelle Chanwa, I know another Michelle, and I'm the marketing coordinator here at Gibson Associates. And I will open the floor to you, Michelle, for you to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Um, I'm Michelle Gibson, and I am the founder of Gibson Associates. And so we're a group practice established in 2021. We've got a team of, with students, it kind of goes towards 30 people and can grow from that depending on when we have our students. And we offer psychotherapy and counseling services in Ontario, both in person at locations across Ontario and then also virtually. And we also offer organizational services as well as trainings for both folks who are seeking more information about psychotherapy techniques and models, and also for folks who are leaning into or who already have established private practices about running their business, running their practice, and also the softer side of it, which is taking care of themselves within that as well. So we're a pretty multifaceted clinic. And you're finding me today in London, Ontario, at our office here.
Thank you. So I want to kick things off a little bit by talking about who you were before you happened to become Michelle Gibson, CEO, founder of your own sort of mental health group practice with Gibson Associates. And I can't really speak for everyone here, but I can probably imagine that we have some folks joining us who are currently sort of in that stage of contemplating that jump to being, their own founders and owners of their own private practices. So why don't you get us kind of started by letting us know a little bit more about who you were before you took that jump?
Yeah, so before I started Gibson Associates, I made the first jump into solo practice. I was a solo practitioner. I established my practice in 2012 when I began to take on private clients, and then more formally established my business in 2013. And I was, prior to that, I did all the things that you do in kind of social service, social work, in the counseling field. I worked in not-for-profits, in corrections, in John Howard Society. Then I shifted into inpatient mental health care. And then I shifted into a private role at a rehab company. And all that was kind of the nature of the work. I couldn't really find a permanent contract, or, I was kind of, my education was kind of skilling me out of the roles that I was in. So I was shifting. And my private practice, kind of making that leap, came from really seeing that, one, the job market was tough. It was tough kind of holding on to waiting for a permanent position. And then when I found one, feeling like I kind of had to take it because it was like the only one. And then also feeling the limits of the work that I was doing as a clinician, working in an organization, especially that is limited to number of sessions, scope of sessions. It can feel like it might not align with who you are in your practice, who you are as a practitioner, the kind of work that you want to do. And I was definitely feeling caged in. Which led me to make the jump into starting my own private practice. Over 10 years ago. Yeah, it was the best decision I've ever made, though it was incredibly scary at the time. But I'm so grateful that I did it now.
And I know that we are technically a trauma-informed clinician. I know that it sort of came from this gap that you were seeing as well in the work that you were doing. Do you want to speak a little bit on that, and perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I was part of that limiting kind of my practice. I was trained in, I was trained in EMDR in 2012, I believe. I believe that I did my training. So I was doing that as I was working within another organization, but I was capped in that organization for like how much I could do. We were depending on insurance to like kind of approve certain number of sessions. There wasn't a whole lot of buy-in for trauma specialized care either. It was very, very just kind of acute. Rather than kind of seeing maybe the longer term potential and importance of the work, which is part of, that was also a really big part of that kind of caged in feeling when I started my own practice. It's because it just really wasn't aligning. The work I was doing in an organization that wasn't my own was not aligning with the kind of work I wanted to do. So having my own practice really allowed me to set the tone of my work, really set the vision and like the mission statement of what I wanted to be doing, which was really trauma specialized services focused on providing my clients with the kind of care and support that they needed, whether it be for a few sessions, because that's all that they, had coverage for, or whether it be, for a longer term counseling or psychotherapy focus. It allowed me to work and kind of set those goals alongside my clients rather than feeling like I was kind of working from those goals coming top down on top of me.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's
trauma. Oh, go ahead.
oh no, sorry, sorry to interrupt. Please
Well, I was
continue.
just going to say that, yeah, trauma was the kind of foundation of my individual practice. And then it's become the foundation for our clinic as well, which is definitely kind of built on the foundation of my solo practice.
It's interesting because I feel like for a lot of people, the journey both towards starting your own private practice and sort of knowing the route that you want to take can be a bit non-linear. It can be very like different from person to person. So your journey may not be other people's journey. Whether it's like you said, like starting out with community work or in a group practice that isn't your own. I feel like it kind of does take that little bit of spark or seeing the gap that is within the market or the community that you sort of want to fill, and that sort of sometimes pushes us into private practice. Um, so I want to ask then that after you decided to kind of take that leap and you started to sort of want to stretch your practitioner limbs beyond like someone else's practice, and when you saw the gap in the market, what were sort of those early days like, when it was just you behind the wheel of the ship and sort of um, coming into your own private practice where it's very much as scary. It is starting your own business, so it is as scary as starting your own business. And I feel like most people will have that moment of being like, I'm behind the wheel, it's all on me, I am my own boss. But then sort of that reality kind of sets in like, oh no, it's all on my shoulders. So what were kind of those early days like when it was just right after you took the leap and it's just you? Yeah, what was it like?
Yeah, I think you touched on kind of the sense of it. It was both this kind of liberating feeling, okay, it's just me. I can make these decisions. I can set this tone. I was like making my own office space, which felt so exciting, everything from, furniture to like how I was going to be doing the work. But then also, I remember signing my first lease for an office space and just like getting back into my car. I was so elated. And then all of a sudden, it was exactly like that. I was like, oh my gosh, it is all on me. And feeling just so scared about how am I going to do this? How am I going to kind of create this longevity in my work? How am I going to build a caseload? Like all of those insecurities and fears kind of started to sink in. And it was this, thankfully, I had this balance of these like parts of myself that were really driving, the driving the car and saying, we can do this, and this is the next step, as well as the parts that were there that were saying, like, this is terrifying, and why are we doing this? And why don't we just go back to this job where there's, security or this kind of feeling of buffer? And I think it's really great to recognize that that is so normal. That's such a human experience to be both excited and, hopeful, but also, insecure and doubtful and worried, and kind of being able to hold space for both of those things is such a I think, such an important part of starting your practice because it really does bring you to those questions like, who do I want to be in this? How do I want to set the tone for my practice? What do I need to work on within myself that will allow me to feel more like internally secure to see myself through this? And so it is, it is both. And definitely those first, the advice that I got were it's the first 5 years. Usually by the first 3 years, the 3 year mark, if you make it that far, you've got a sense of, okay, my caseload's grown, or I kind of got a niche. I've been able to maybe raise my rates and kind of create an income that you can count on, and maybe a caseload that you're really loving working with. And that by that third year, you can really kind of ride some of the ebbs and flows of healthcare and mental health care, just kind of seasonality of it, the needs that shift throughout the year. Um, by that fifth year, you've kind of weathered some of those storms, maybe those slower moments. You have a better sense typically of, okay, how do I want to be moving forward? So I found that really anchored me. Okay, if I can get to year three, I'll have a better sense of this. And if I can get to year five, I'm really gonna know. And I think that was true for me. And I work a lot with private practitioners, people who are in all kinds of health and mental health fields who are in their own business. And that's what I hear a lot too. It's kind of those first years really are kind of working internally as well as externally to set up that business. And then it sees you through.
Yeah, so you'd say there's a huge learning curve.
Yeah, in most health and mental health programs, we aren't trained for this, which is I've taught social work for a number of years. In my mind, I think that's because historically private practice was not the main area that most social workers went into. It might be like later on in one's career, but it seems like there's been like a generational shift. A lot of people want to go into their own practice. And so I think the school programs haven't really caught up with what we're seeing. So I didn't take a business course. I didn't know anything about, I maybe knew about budgeting for my personal life. I did know what it means to run an organization. Even just as a solo practitioner, budgeting, overhead costs, considering my own personal savings, how to separate out my income, what can I expense, all of those pieces. And then you add in like the other marketing and these other components that come in, and it's just not a part of our training. And so, well, we can be like the best clinicians with the greatest intentions going into our own practice. Um, I think for most of us, it can feel like a steep learning curve on the back end, like, oh, wow, there are all these things I haven't been trained in. And I'll add, the market continuously changes in our fields, whether it be, shifting to virtual during the pandemic, whether it be just a larger number of people who are in private practice. Maybe traditional platforms like Psychology Today for, a psychotherapist not being as relevant, but maybe need to be more present on social media or Google Analytics. Now all these things that, oh, we also need to know that too. And so the learning curve really is can feel big. And I'd say when I first started, I thought of myself as a clinician first. And as a clinician who was going to just, be running a business as like, that was like not the important part. And as I moved through those learning curves, I definitely realized I have to see myself as a founder or a business owner or whatever you want to call yourself, but whatever, a leader, even if it's just yourself for your business, as well as a clinician, and see those two as partnerships. And that was a real like mental shift for me to take on. But that definitely helped um, like reduce that curve, the height of that curve once I did that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's so funny to be to jump into private practice, perhaps from, having a group practice or being part of something else, because, yeah, you have to make that shift from seeing yourself just as a clinician, because you're no longer just the clinician. You are now the backbone, especially if it's a solo practice, the backbone of everything. You have to figure out the marketing, the billing, you have to figure out client care, how to get those clients, how to retain those clients, and just everything that sort of goes into it. So yeah, I feel like that is absolutely the most massive sort of learning curve, and being able to ride those waves can help bring down the curve a little bit.
Absolutely. And that it's I if I could speak to my like, younger self for starting out in business, I really wish that I was able to kind of work with my own insecurities about not knowing and to be able to do more trainings in these areas or put myself out there to say, I actually have no idea how to do this. Um, that would have been really, really useful. And that's why I find it so, it's so great whenever I'm around, people in private practice where we can talk about, yeah, this is really hard. And I don't actually know how to reconcile my month end, or I don't actually know how to like negotiate this because these are skill sets that we can kind of say like and like lean into each other for support and learning through. Um, and so, yeah, being able to kind of find your community through that and kind of really like not let any fear or insecurity, lack of knowing get in the way of seeking that. Because it's just, of course, like we weren't trained for this. So, of course, we don't know.
And it's sometimes I feel like it could be hard to find sort of that community. As much as it is a community, sometimes it can also be like these are also your competitors in a way, but by and large, you want to view it a bit as a community of the people that have done it before you. And especially finding those networks where there is no competition, there is just this sharing of the knowledge. And I know for Gibson Associates, we're kind of leaning into that this year, and we'll talk a little bit about that later as we talk about the Clinician Reset, which is going to be a wonderful opportunity for anyone jumping into private practices to kind of have that open forum to talk and learn anything that might be helpful, might lower their learning curves a little bit around starting their own private practices. Yeah, so um from what we were talking about earlier about your background and getting started in trauma-informed care and sort of developing that as a bit of a niche around what you enjoyed working with and also where there was that gap in the market. I feel like among all the other struggles that kind of come up or and all these learning curves that come up as you start your own private practice, or even just in general as a therapist, I feel like finding your niche can be one of those really difficult things for a lot of people starting out. Like you said, the market has changed, it's become very saturated in a way. So, do you happen to have any advice for certain clinicians who maybe are in the thick of figuring out where they fit in this mental health landscape and finding their niche and things like that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Um, well, I'll just highlight how important it is to authentically first, like not based on what's needed out there, but really what works best for you. Because there's no way for any of us for us to know how to work with all populations, most modality. We just can't. Um, I've known that I've had to kind of ride that roller coaster too of like, there's definitely I have a part of me that sees what other people is doing. It's like, I want to do that. Or I feel a bit of sense of like, why can't I? I don't work with that population. I need to like find a way to do that. There can be that sense of kind of like, whether it's competitiveness or just like wanting to learn more. Um, and that can really lead us down a path of just overgeneralizing ourselves. Checking off all the boxes on those forms, whether it's for like victim services, psychology today, whatever, anything kind of marketing to say, I do all of this. And while we think that's going to attract, I'm going to get the widest, funnel towards me, what ends up happening is you get lost in the weeds because your message of who you are and why it is that you're doing the work that you're doing is not authentic to like one thing. It's hard to sell yourself on everything. And so the intention I see is so good. It's like wanting to support the most amount of people or, be able to grow your practice as well in a particular kind of way. But it's actually quite counterintuitive. And I say that knowing that that can invoke some fear in folks, being like, I don't want to take off, anxiety from my checklist or this. And like that's something just to like lean into. Like there's something there, whether that's because that's really important for you to keep in your practice, or it's because there's a fear there about what it means to like miss out on clients. What I've seen time and time again from my own work, as well as supporting my team, as well as supporting people in my own consulting and supervision services and training services, is that niching brings about more success, more clients, a practice that's more sustainable, both in growth, but also for you, like one that feels like, yeah, I'm doing the work that I want to be doing. These are the kind of problems or concerns or stories or experiences that I want to sit with. And you don't have to like put yourself into the tiniest little thing and say, like, I only work with this one thing. Because I think diversity is great in practice as well. But it's really thinking about how do I create niches then where I can kind of build myself into rather than just saying everything. And that's something that can be really hard. I know what I see with our students or newer clinicians, and that's one of their sticky points is I don't want to like say that I do this mostly, even though I do, or even though I want to, because I'm afraid of this. And it really leads into a lot of great conversations about what that means for them in terms of the worries that they're having. Um, but yeah, niching is so important. I did it myself when I specialized in trauma. Um, gosh, when I first started, however many years ago that was. Um, this might sound wild, but at that time, there weren't a lot of trauma specialists. Certainly, as a social worker in private practice, in the areas that I trained in. So I was like, that was enough. Like, that was enough of a specialty. Trauma today, that's something that I think most clinicians, and from a psychotherapy lens, they tick off, if they've got some training in. And so it's become like, you can see it kind of becoming oversaturated. So then we have to find different ways of niching within that. I work with first responders. I work with moral injury. I specialize in working with healthcare providers. I work with children. I do this specific modality. And so we can see how with, what's happening in the field, how that challenges us to further dig into, okay, how do I want to practice? Who do I want to be in this? Um, and I'll say your niche can change. Mine did. I was an EMDR therapist, and then I realized I needed something more body oriented. So I added in somatic therapy and I kind of dug in there and I really love that. And then I thought, oh, you know what? I want to still focus in this area, but I'm missing something. And then I started training in IFS therapy and I specialize, and that's my niche. I think this is probably where I'm going to ground into. I don't know for how long, but it's definitely somewhere that I really, really love to be. And there's something about being able to follow yourself along that pathway and trusting that it's leading you somewhere that you want to be, which is what happened for me. And this is what I do. I do this kind of therapy. I work with these kinds of clients or these kinds of concerns. And my practice, has never been busier. And so as I've continued to niche, I've seen it just time and time again. So yeah, I can't stress that enough, how important it is. And how much support sometimes we need to be able to do that as well. And that's okay.
Yeah, and from the marketing lens, I see it all the time, like sitting down with folks and talking about what what audiences, what populations do you want to speak to? What not only speaks to them, but also what speaks to you? What do you like to talk about? What are things that draw your interest versus what doesn't draw your interest? And kind of working with that to sort of develop a marketing plan to really set you apart from others. So what I kind of see is some people are really resistant. They're like, no, no, like you said, I don't want to like say I don't do like some of these, or like cut off any potential stream of clients or anything. But what you kind of end up finding, and this is true in like marketing for anything, but also within like clinic work, is that as you sort of get really clear on your message and who you want to talk to and who you want to sit in your seat, and who you think fulfills you and fulfills your practice, you start to really, your practice, like you saw, starts to really grow, and it becomes more sustainable because not only are you positioning yourself as sort of a thought leader in this specific topic that you're really enjoying yourself, you're enjoying it yourself. So you want to
Right.
continue. coming to
That's
work
right.
and giving your all and like just strengthening up your practice. But yeah, by and large, a lot of finding your niche is saying like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I'm skilled in this. And it's always important to also know that those that can change. Like for example, when you started out with mainly trauma-informed care, position yourself as a really knowledgeable person within that niche, like an expert. And then as your practice sort of grew and changed, like again, you lead into being an expert in those other things. And the people who seek out those sort of topics or seek out that sort of help find you and they sustain your practice. And you're able to sort of see where your path leads you without facing the burnout or yeah, anything that just drags you down, makes you not want to do this anymore. Yeah, it's just really fulfilling. I can't recommend enough people do the inner work, the outer work, networking, talking to other people, other clinicians, about like what are they seeing, what's out there to just sort of help refine that niche and like paint a better picture of who you want to be, who you want your practice to sort of service in the world, stuff like that. Yeah, niching. I can't speak to it enough.
Absolutely. And I think now more than ever, people want authenticity. Like they want to know. I mean, I've seen even with, you know, expectations on physicians, things that like we never were supposed to have expectations on. Like they want, people want to feel like a relationship. Like they want to feel like it's that, that sense of like building rapport and empathy. They think that is that sense of attunement and choice over, providers is really like that's great. Like that's what's being led with right now, I think, by any service user. And so they want authenticity and they want to hear your voice. They don't want to hear like, a copy and paste from like someone else's, Psychology Today, or they want to hear the words you want to use, your experience, who you are. I'm big on also making sure that our folks on our team are doing videos because I even think like hearing actually your actual voice, like connecting to you, it's definitely shifted over the years. It's certainly I've seen in practice, but that, really speaks to just like that authenticity that comes from finding and being rooted in your niche is so important.
Yeah, it also ties to, yeah, marketing. Once again, like back in the day, you didn't need to do too much of the social media. You didn't have to find
Mhm.
all the unique ways to reach your clients. No, but nowadays, yeah, like you said, being able to put yourself out there, being able to sort of share your voice and everything, whether that is through your Instagram or your Facebook or your LinkedIn, being able to set yourself apart from the thousands and thousands of other Psych Today profiles that you have out there and be like, hey, I do this one specific thing that you are looking for. And you have all the people who may have been spread across like 10 different therapists who all do anxiety, all of the people who are like, I'm dealing with this specific anxiety that were previously dispersed. Now notice you. They're like, hey, this person, I like their attitude, I like their cadence, and I think that they seem like more of a knowledgeable expert compared to sort of the other people who it's just a part of their like docket of things they offer. You're like, hey, no, this is exactly what I do. Come to me. I know exactly what I'm talking about. This is all I do. Well, not necessarily all that I do, but this is something, a big part of what I do, right? And you end up, yeah, really getting those clients while you put yourself out there, even though it's terrifying.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any shortage of um things that can like pull at you, like causing insecurity or fear or like, just not knowing as you're, developing a private practice. And that's why, again, that sense of community and like connecting with other people is so important who are doing this. Um, because it normalizes it. Like it's just, people, it's so great to be able to lean in and be like, I'm worried about changing my profile to say this, or like really like leaning in more heavily into doing this kind of work. And it's good to have that kind of support because it can feel scary. It can feel kind of nerve-wracking to do that, but it is so, so important.
Yes, exactly. And there's always interesting ways to market to your niche. I know sometimes it's hard to say just shout it from the rooftops like, "Hey, I service uh teens going through anxiety or adolescents dealing with ADHD or neurodiversity in school or anything like that, it can be hard to figure out how do you talk to that niche? How do you set yourself apart? And that's when it comes down to free resources, networking of all things, of course, to be able to tell that your colleagues immediately like what you do and be known that is what you do, so that way you get those referrals directly to you. But yeah, resources, putting yourself out there, all of these things, whether it's workshops, webinars, all of them that can speak directly to these potential clients that you want. And yeah, as your niche changes, those things also change and adapt, and you can bring in fresh new clients. For example, if you used to previously do, like you, for example, you used to do trauma-informed care. As you move into IFS, you change your marketing strategies, you change the resources that you put out to start getting those new clients. So you're never pigeonholed into one thing. Everything's adapting alongside you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it rolls into it. Like, like my trauma clients, I still see, but I do it within a particular lens. And so, like, so many times when we think, oh, I'm losing this, things also kind of adapt. Or the best thing that happens is you retain like a wedge of that previous thing as you build kind of a new niche area. And then that gives you that diversity within your practice that really sustains you, that kind of allows you to not feel too bogged down in any one thing, which is so important.
So, all right, moving on before I get too much into niches. That's my marketing soul that enjoys it. But for you, so you've grown your solo practice from just you to a full group practice with several other employees behind the scenes. I want to know how you navigated that growth because I know for most folks who are first starting out in private practice, they'll mostly be doing all of the work themselves. They'll be their own marketer, their own admin, everything all on their own. And we're working with tight budgets. Budgets are always tight when you're first starting out. But hopefully as everyone's businesses grow, as their private practices grow, how would you suggest folks, or how did you yourself start to kind of juggle that roadblock of sort of knowing when to start outsourcing for help, like when it stopped being efficient for you to handle it all by yourself?
Yeah, that was a real pain edge for me was not doing it all. Like definitely as a solo practitioner, I did everything, any of my marketing, networking, budgeting, all of that of course landed with me, and my income depended solely on, my hours. And so all of that, all of those kinds of pressures as a solo practitioner, those are within kind of one house. And then as I expanded into a group practice, I thought, okay, this is going to be, I already know how to do all this stuff. This is going to be fine. And really what I did was I expanded the number of, the number of hours of admin time, of marketing costs, of all of that stuff. And so, for the first year or two of our group practice, I really still was like, kind of holding on to trying to do it all and feeling like I had to. There was definitely a block for me about really fully outsourcing any one thing. And it came from doing it all for so long on my own. And, what it would be like to actually outsource felt like a lot of work. And also felt I was fearful. I was wondering like, what is that actually gonna like work out well? What if it doesn't? So like, there was lots of kind of work happening within me around just trying to kind of challenge that. I can say above and beyond having a team is such a gift. And I have such a brilliant team, like such a brilliant from you, Michelle, in our marketing to, our client care coordinator, business relationship coordinator, we've got a manager of professional practice now who helps me support our clinicians. We have an admin who helps with our bookkeeping and our, anything to do with like billing and client care. It is so amazing. And knowing like what I kind of got to for kind of having to do that is realizing I wasn't enjoying it. But I never enjoyed doing the financial pieces. That was never something, even as a solo practitioner. I remember getting out like my receipts in January that I probably threw all in one box and then spending like 2 days going through it and like moaning and groaning and saying, I'm not doing this again next year. And like do it again the next year because I just didn't want to have to deal with that part of the work. Um, Probably a really good sign for me early on that maybe having someone external would have been really helpful. But I just was, I was kind of holding on to any of the, the costs of that, what that would look like. And now that we've got so many great options, whether it's kind of fractional services, it's a contractor like a VA who helps you, someone who does bookkeeping, someone who does, again, like fractional marketing for you. There are different programs in different areas that help your systems run. And these one have gotten really finessed over the last 5, 6 years. I think especially over the pandemic and folks looking for virtual work. So that's a gift right now. So there's definitely more options. And also I can't stress enough what an important change that was. And it really came from kind of this realization of like, why am I trying to do everything when I don't actually want to do these roles? And what would it look like if I gave myself permission to kind of hand those off to people who, I can, lean into and trust? It gave me, and which, then what would it leave space for? And it's left space for all the things I really enjoy doing, whether it's, teaching and trainings, connecting with people, building community, still seeing clients. Like it's created this space for me um, that that's been such a gift. So I cannot stress enough. And also the additional benefit is that you build yourself your own community too. I'm not alone in my practice now running it. I now have, even if it's someone that you're contracting, you have someone who's invested in your business alongside you, which is such a gift in an industry where we are often so siloed and alone. So yes, can't recommend it enough. And it's something that I'm always happy to talk about is kind of like how to lean into it, kind of how to budget for that on the more practical side, but also how to create space within yourself too to allow for that change to happen.
Yeah, it sounds like overall, the entire journey of getting to private practice is a lot of trust falls, a lot of trusting yourself and allowing yourself, giving yourself permission from whether it's like leaving that steady job and jumping into private practice where you're your own boss, you're that one person who is now doing the work of all of those contractors when you're first starting out. And then another trust fall into the niching, like I trust that I'm going to get the clients while I narrow myself down. And then as your practice grows, you're trusting that as you offload some of your other roles to other people, that the budgeting is there, that they will have a solid return on investment and you won't be, trusting your practice with other people. So much of it comes down to being like that permission that you give yourself and also just a trust fall that you're gonna
Yeah.
get you're gonna get to where you need to be with your private practice.
Oh, yeah. And that's the same way with any business, is that it's so much just it's, making a stake. It's saying, I'm gonna try this. It's investing. It's betting. And the best thing about private practice is you're betting on yourself. That's probably what brought you into this. And the great thing about outsourcing is you begin to get to have choice over who you're gonna kind of build into your team, which is a way that I really kind of, pivoted my thinking is not like, oh, what could go wrong, but like really what could go right in this? Like who could I trust in building my team out that gives me more support? So yeah, that, it's as you outsource, you're building your team that you're trust falling into, which is so powerful as a private clinician.
Yeah, that's why it's great to have those networks where you can ask others or for the advice for their networks. But like, how did you navigate? How, like, who did you pull in when you were hitting this roadblock? And what did you do? Like if you meet another clinician who has like a really strong niche and a really strong presence, like how did you like end up there and pulling from them and having those, yeah, like we said, those spaces where you're able to do that. And then I will get into that again shortly, but I'll have one last question before we do, and that is in general, what is one piece of advice overall that you'd give someone considering going into private practice, undertaking this massive journey?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I'm sitting with that maybe today. I would say the really important thing is to really lean into yourself and kind of what you are wanting this to look like. As you're starting out in any endeavor, it can be really easy to allow fear to make decisions for you, like generalizing your practice to get the most amount of clients, keeping your fees really low to try to attract clients, not having a cancellation policy, whatever, working with a contract that, pays, in a way that you don't find actually values your time. So many decisions that folks often make at the start do not lead to a sustainable practice. And I know for myself, if I had just slowed myself down a little bit more at the start to say, wow, I'm actually really scared. I'm really worried about making this sustainable. And that's why I'm valuing myself in this way or my time in this. That's why I'm losing money on sessions. Um, I would have been able to kind of step back in a different way and value myself differently. Um, but I kind of just got into like the drive and go, go, go. And it wasn't until about a year into my practice where I said, oh, wow, this actually isn't sustaining me in lots of different ways and had to make some bigger changes. So I think if for people entering in, it's just slowing things down at the start. Really want the kind of questioning within yourself, why am I making this decision? Is it coming out of choice? Because I want to make this, I feel confident about this, or is it becoming out of fear because I'm worried about what could happen if I do something different? And if you're leaning over here towards fear, that's a trailhead. That's a good place to pause with and see what might be there for you to explore before making that decision.
And again, that's why it's great to have those networking opportunities or those opportunities to just kind of have that community all with you, able to help sort of guide you through all those learning edges. So before we head off to questions from our wonderful attendees, I just wanted to, yeah, offer you the floor to talk a little bit about what's coming down the line for Gibson Associates in terms of the Clinician Reset and supporting those who are starting their private practice journey.
Yes, yes. So, in the second week of October, and I'm just completely blank. It's the 15th and 16th, right? I just want to make sure I'm not citing a date that I'm like, it's the 15th and 16th. I'm confident about that. I'll say that. Um, we are having a clinician reset event, 2 days or one day, depending on what you'd like, in the beautiful Horseshoe Valley. If you haven't been, or if you're from the area, then it's just outside of Barrie. So not too far from the GTA. And a worth it drive for folks who are kind of closer to me in London. It's beautiful. You get the fall colors. It'll be gorgeous, gorgeous. And we're kind of rooting down there for the first day to talk all about these topics. We're going to be talking about what it's like to be in private practice, what it's like to be starting in private practice. So you can be at any level of your journey, graduating and thinking about starting a private practice. You can be just kind of doing the initial steps. You can be in it because these are all relevant questions for ongoing reflection and learning. We're talking about what it's like from the inside out in terms of kind of working with your own system and thinking about niching. And then more kind of the outside pieces, marketing, outsourcing, kind of the budgeting kind of expense pieces. And the biggest piece is around how do we sustain this work? Where we know most people burn out, most businesses in private practice aren't successful. There's high rates of failure. So how do we sustain in that, both internally and externally? And so that first day is going to be kind of coming together, kind of talking, connecting, and through different presenters from our organization. And then we're going to have space for kind of coming together for like meals and kind of more informally just connecting with each other, which is such a gift in our industry to be able to find like-minded folks who want to connect. And then the second day, we have a really beautiful day planned at Veta Nordic Spa, which again, if you haven't been, please Google it. It is so lovely. It is we're just going to spend the day just kind of in that lens of taking care of ourselves. So we'll start the day off with a meditation and exercise together, and then we'll move into attending the spa and just kind of enjoying, slowing things down. Informal, nothing planned that day that's too kind of heady, just connecting with each other or not, or just taking some time for silence or meditation or whatever kind of works for your system. So those will be our 2 days together, and really welcoming folks, as I said, from different stages, I should say, of their practice, and then also different types of work as well. It's really relevant for anyone who's starting in a practice, a healthcare provider, allied health, mental health. Um, all of these factors are so relevant for our work and for our businesses.
Yeah, definitely. Two amazing days. I've seen Veta. Oh my God. It looks so beautiful. But yeah, 2 great days, networking, all of the ins and outs of figuring out your private practice, the inner work, the outer work, the clients, the billing, everything that goes into it all, just wrapped in one wonderful, neat packed package, and then a wonderful spa day, which sounds so amazing.
Oh yeah, it'll be fantastic. It will be. And coming up in soon, I we're going to be also promoting that we're offering a discount with our discounted rates. We're actually opening up some of our discounted rates for students and new grads. So please watch out if that's you. That's something that we'll be posting for when that's opened. And so, yeah, if that's something that you're interested in. Or if you're even just interested in joining us one day, we have, again, as I mentioned, 1 day, 2 day options, but highly recommend Veta. So definitely if you're considering one day, check out Veta because you might regret it if you're driving away without doing that.